Hey, Word for Thought podcast. This is my first podcast. I am your host, Nicole, and I'm here with our guest host, Summer Kang.
Hey, Potters.
So, in this podcast, we're going to be talking about the causes of teenage burnout because I think that it's something that is happening a lot more often in our worlds, and I see it. I see it with my community and my environment at school and my friends. So, we're going to be discussing what causes teenage burnout and what it is. Teenage burnout is happening more often now than it would be like even 20 years ago.
I think now with like the environment and everything that's happening, everything is so busy now compared to 20 years ago. That's why teenage burnout is more common.
So would you say that maybe when people say that like our society and like our generation is more sensitive or too sensitive, do you think that's actually true? Or do you think that the circumstances that we're living under are just harder?
I think it's true to some extent because when I go on social media, there are many cases when someone comments something and then people take it too seriously. Or that could be because of their own experiences or what happened to them and what's happening in their life. But in general, I think, yes, now people can be kind of sensitive.
But like if you think about it in like that one scenario that you're talking about with the comment, 20 years ago, they wouldn't even have to see that comment. So are you sure it's not the circumstances that are changing, or do you really think we're just too sensitive? So essentially what I'm asking is 20 years ago, do you think that if you were to show a person a comment that would be mean or something that would hurt someone's feeling today, do you think they would react any differently 20 years ago? Or is it completely just the circumstances that are changing?
I believe that compared to 20 years ago, people are more sensitive, and it could be because of the circumstances of everything.
But do you think that if you were to show the same comment to someone 20 years ago, they would act differently or not?
I don't think they would take it as seriously. They would just maybe just like go on with it.
So you do think that our generation is becoming too sensitive?
Yes, I do.
Okay, that's understandable. So although that I think that what you're saying about like our generation being more sensitive can be true to some extent, I also think that now more than ever we have more pressure on us than like 20 years ago, like someone our age would have. And like by that I mean like more commitments and more is needed of us when it comes to school, and there's just like a lot more overall pressure. Do you agree?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of pressure now, and especially with like university and everything, standards have gone higher. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of pressure on students and youth, so that could be a part and a reason to why people are sensitive now.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like our generation is like being spread out too thinly.
Yeah, that's true because like 20 years ago, I don't think the world was as crazy as it is now. And there's so many things going on that it's pretty hard for teens to like focus on a certain thing.
So you were mentioning things about university, and I actually think that's very interesting because I feel like universities are becoming more demanding in terms of like acceptances, and a lot of this has to do about extracurriculars. So now I feel like they're definitely taking a look at how you're participating in the community a lot more than they were before, rather than like just taking a look at your grades. So having to like handle having good grades, but as well as like extracurriculars, which take up a lot of time, and they could also be like mentally exhausting because if you're putting so much effort into both your schoolwork and extracurriculars just to get into school, it could be very stressful.
I totally agree with that, but in a way I also agree with how the universities are working because the extracurriculars are a huge part of life, and that's how you prove that you can like work in a job and have a career. And grades aren't always the most important matter, but that also puts a lot of pressure on the people because they need to like balance, and people have an expectation for them to do good in both extracurriculars and school. Something that also seems totally like unfair, especially towards me because I'm an Asian, is that universities, they have been accepting more minority races, and it's harder for like Asian people to get into Harvard, for example. And Waterloo, they're trying to accept more females, which in a way is good because we want to balance out the diversity and the people in university. But at the same time, it's super hard for for us to do good and get into the university we want to.
So I feel like we both understand why it's happening, and I think we both understand the pros of it, but do you think it's fair? Like, honestly, would you rather have it a different way?
That's kind of hard to answer, though, because I'm the one that's getting affected by this because I am an Asian. But if I wasn't an Asian, if I was part of a minority race, I would be, like, more thankful that this is happening and could take this as an opportunity to really get into a good university. So in a way, it's kind of hard to explain, but I do think it's pretty unfair.
Do you really think that this is like an actual contributor to your stress? Like, do you think it has something to do with burnout? This like pressure over university?
Well, right now in grade 10, it's not that big of a pressure, but later on it will definitely be a bigger pressure, especially because our school is IB, right? And most of the population is from Asia. So we're all going to be pretty stressed about getting into university.
That's actually really interesting. I haven't heard about that before. And I didn't really know that that was like an actual contributor to your stress. So now I kind of want to move on to a different topic, a different cause, I guess, of teenage burnout, which is lack of sleep. And I know that there's a lot of like petitions going around about trying to like change when school starts so that it starts off later. But I kind of don't know who to blame. Like, do you think you got enough sleep on school days?
No, I don't. But that's my fault.
Because I feel the same way, but I know people are blaming it on like many different causes. And there are actually like scientific facts that like that teenagers... Okay, so basically, according to National Health Service of England, sleep experts say teens today are sleeping less than they ever have. So basically, research suggests that teenagers' body clocks are kind of set later than adults and younger children. So basically, has to do about like the hormones in our body, but it also has to do about the fact that there's like bright room lighting and TVs and game consoles and being on our phones so often that it actually affects the melatonin that we produce when the lights are off. So basically, because of all the lights that we surround ourselves with, we chemically have a harder time falling asleep, on top of the whole thing about hormones, like the fact that like we have a different clock in us. Do you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, because every time at night, if I go on my phone a lot, I have trouble sleeping after, even though it's really late. But if I don't go on my phone for like the whole day or something, I have an easier time falling asleep. So I guess that fact is true. But also, the lack of sleep is probably my own fault because like you said, there's so much things going on, like the lights and so much media and things that you can do. Like that has been taking me away from the time that I can have to sleep. So partly it's my fault.
So you're blaming it on yourself rather than like society's structure, which structures around social media and like our generation constantly being on our phones. So you think it's your fault even though it's kind of pushed on you?
It's true that society has like brought out a lot of media onto us, and that definitely influenced us to like use it more and do more things with it and add it into like our daily lifestyle. But because I'm making my own decisions, I do believe I have like some stuff to blame for because I'm taking part in it.
Okay, so other than like social media and electronics, do you think that we can be blaming school? Because sometimes I do feel like I get way too much work within way too small of an amount of time. And like there are petitions for starting school later. Do you think that we should start school later? Would you blame school?
Okay. Well, that petition for starting school later, I don't entirely agree with that, because if we started later, that would just like give us less time to actually like do our stuff. And I feel like us teenagers would not use that time in like a good way, and we would just use it to go on like Netflix or like social media or something. So in a way, getting up early and doing all this stuff earlier gives us more time to like do our own life after.
I agree with that, but then if you also take a look at like the way our bodies work, like a teenager's body works, we need to be sleeping in later and going to sleep later. Like that's just the way our like they said our body clocks work. So it wouldn't like biologically be smarter, but I completely agree with you. Like I would definitely just like sleep in, well, not I'd sleep in because I'd be watching Netflix until like 1 a.m. Like for sure. That would be the case. So I honestly don't know who to blame. But do you also think that the workload contributes to your lack of sleep?
It's kind of funny because for my school, it's super annoying because it's either a lot of work at once or not enough work. So whenever you get that huge amount of work, you have like no sleep that day. And then you get into that habit of not sleeping and you just don't sleep in general and you just sleep later. So it's like a repeating pattern. And I don't really know who to blame here because partly that's how the school works. And
I don't know. I agree with you. I feel like it definitely depends on how you handle the workload, because I also feel like I completely agree with you about how sometimes we have like no work and then one day we just like are stuck with a truckload of work. But I also feel like we always hear about the work that's due beforehand, and we could definitely have spread our time more evenly. So to some extent, I think it is my fault. What about you?
Well, now that I've been getting more into the routine of school, there is moments when there's like high amount of work and then low amount of work, but it's not like a super crazy amount. And the reason to my lack of sleep is partly because I procrastinate to just leave it all in the end. So I guess it's like an equal balance of blame for both me and how the school works.
Got it. Now, do you think that lack of sleep, like, personally affects you and, like, ever burns you out? Do you think it's an actual problem when you do not get enough sleep? Do you think it actually affects you?
For me, it's kind of different, though, because I feel like if I really don't sleep a lot, then I'm more focused throughout the day, but, like, when I sleep too much, I get, like, not as focused. It's kind of ironic because that's not what you would think sleep would do to you, but that's probably because my sleep schedule is so messed up. And yeah,
I don't think that's healthy. I just don't think it's healthy. But I kind of also agree with you. But I also know that when I don't have sleep, like enough sleep for an entire week, it definitely does burn me out. Like, it's really, like, I need, like, 2 days to completely refresh. And at some point, like, I just stop caring about the work, and I just want it done so I can go to sleep.
yeah.
So do you feel like your lack of sleep makes you more inclined to work, or do you actually think it helps the quality of your work? Like, because I know that sometimes, basically, when you procrastinate, you just want to get your work done. And maybe when you aren't getting enough sleep, you just kind of want to go back to sleep, and you're procrastinating. You don't want to procrastinate your work so you can go back to sleep, if that makes sense.
Okay, that is true, but I did find out that every time I slept, like, very little amount, during class, I would have a hard time, like, focusing, and I would literally just, like, want to sleep on the desk. And this has happened, like, multiple times.
All right. Well, I actually have one more thing to say about that, and that is when I was in grade 7 or 8, my guidance counselor told me one thing that actually really changed how I looked at my high school life, and that is that there are 3 things in high school life: social life, good grades, and sleep, but you can only have 2. So at this point in my life, I kind of feel like I just have good grades and sleep. And I really gotta work on my social life. It was much better last year, but, like, this year at least I'm getting sleep, which I think helps me out a lot. What do you think you chose?
This year I definitely chose social life. Like, my social life is good. And for my school life, I'm working on it. I wish it was better, but like it's getting better, so I guess that's an improvement. But my sleep life is just totally messed up, and it's time I change it. Like, it's time I sleep. Okay.
Okay, that's very interesting. And I guess we could go back to the topic of social media. Do you think it affects you? Do you think it actually has a big effect on our generation?
Many people say that social media affects us either through like how we're supposed to dress or act or behave based on like the trends. And people say that bullying happens a lot online, but personally, that doesn't really affect me. The only thing that affects me is that I just always have an urge to go on social media and just like do nothing, even if there's nothing to do. Like, it's hard to explain.
No one to reply to or something?
Yeah, I just go on it whenever I'm bored. And that's probably because I've been on social media so much that I'm probably addicted to it, which is why I want to go on it so much.
Mm-hmm.
But that part has definitely affected my life because I know I want to do more with my life, but I'm just like, I just go on social media. And I don't think that's right.
So I actually did a poll on my story, and 88% of the people who voted on my story said that social media affected their mental health in some sort of way. And I definitely feel like I'm part of that statistic because I feel like there's such a fight for relevance on social media, if that makes sense. I don't know if you feel it, but I know certain people are like so obsessed with getting followers or getting likes or, you know, like having connections online that it really starts to like swallow them up and they become really disconnected with what they have physically and in real life. Do you like know anyone like that? Do you agree with me?
Those things like followers and likes, they're nice in the moment, but then after that, they're not that big of a deal to me. That might happen to some people, but to me, it's not huge of an impact.
But do you feel like it has a huge impact on other people? Like, do you know anyone like that? Or do you really just think that's something that someone made up just to make social media sound bad?
From now, I don't know anyone that's like that. Like, all my friends, they honestly don't really care that much like me. So I don't know anyone who's like that.
That's actually really interesting because I know so many people like that. And it's actually very scary. Because I feel like it gets to the point where people even go out with their friends just to like take videos and post pictures online. It's actually really sad. There's also the whole thing about like self-image and expectations and like Photoshop. And I deleted social media, well, Instagram, my main account, for like many reasons, but this was definitely one of them. Because even though you might not be looking at a picture of like Kylie Jenner or Kim Kardashian or some other model and like telling yourself that you're ugly, subconsciously, your brain becomes more comfortable with seeing images like that, and that's what you begin to feel is like the norm. And that really began to affect me, and I don't know. Do you think that it affects you?
Those people and such, I don't believe they affect me that much, but I know that what affects me is like the trends that are happening right now and like fashion and everything. I see it online and then I think to myself like I don't have this kind of stuff and that's not good and everything. So in that way, that does affect me mentally like that.
So yours is like more the expectations part rather than like self-image, I guess, right? Yeah. Okay. Do you feel like our generation and our society now is becoming more disconnected?
Disconnected? Well, I know that in the last generation, people would hang out a lot, and because there was no phones and stuff, so that makes sense. But like, obviously, because there's an easier way to communicate with people, we don't really need to see them. So yeah, in a way that does affect our social life. But I don't really know anymore, because since I've been growing up, there's always been like phones and stuff. So I'm not really sure what a social life is supposed to be now, in a way. But yeah.
I don't know. I wish people stopped relying on social media. And I feel like if people were to actually make an effort to go out and have an in real life social life, life would be a lot better in several ways. And like connections, relationships you have with people wouldn't be as fake. Because although you may say that while you're talking to someone online, it's as if you're having a real conversation with them, it's so different. Because body language, whether you want to admit it or not, is so important too. Like seeing someone, having eye contact with them is really what forms an actual like truthful relationship. So I feel like people are becoming way too disconnected and relying on social media way too much.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that, because there are some cases in my life when I would text someone and then we'd be like super comfortable, and then I'd talk to them in real life and we wouldn't even talk. And it would be so confusing because it felt like we had like in a way a relationship, but then in real life we didn't. And I really didn't like that. So yeah, it does affect our social life.
Yeah, I've actually had like several scenarios like that, which is kind of why I stopped texting people that I don't talk to in real life, because it makes things so awkward. It really does. Like if you're talking to someone every single day for hours and then you see them in real life and you just like don't even want to talk to them, or it's so awkward, it ruins everything. Like, yeah.
Okay, yeah, it does.
Okay, I think that's about it for this podcast. Feel free to comment on our story or on my story, and stay engaged. We'll be posting more polls and like questions for our next podcast. And if you have any questions, feel free to DM us. Thank you. Bye.